All right, so let's jump right in, shall we? We've got some pretty interesting stuff to unpack today.
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to be doing a deep dive into this recent visit to Kyiv from Japanese Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwaya.
Mm-hmm.
It was his first time there since he took on this new role back in September,
Right.
which is also really interesting because it makes this the first visit from Japan, any of their ministers, since the new Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba came into power.
It's a big deal.
Yeah. At first glance, it might look like your everyday, run-of-the-mill diplomatic trip, but there's more to it, I think.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely some stuff to dig into here, for sure.
Yeah. It feels like, there's some signals here about how Japan's foreign policy might be shifting moving forward.
Totally.
So let's break it down. What happened on this visit?
Big meeting, right? Iwaya and Zelensky, face-to-face.
Yeah, and it wasn't even announced beforehand, which adds another layer to it all. Right. That's interesting, the whole unannounced thing. Like, what's the message there? But okay, so they meet, and I think, unsurprisingly, North Korea becomes a major topic of conversation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Zelensky even expressed concerns about the potential for this whole thing, the conflict, to escalate.
Rightfully so.
What's the deal there? Can you give us some context on North Korea's involvement?
Well, there have been reports, pretty credible ones, that North Korea's got soldiers stationed in Kursk Oblast.
Which is right on the border.
Exactly. And apparently some of these troops even came under fire just recently on November 4th.
Wow. So what's the end game here? Is North Korea just lending a hand, providing some boots on the ground, or is there something more thereafter?
That's the big question, isn't it? It really makes you wonder about their motives and what it could all mean for the bigger picture, the potential for this conflict to spread even further.
Iwaya, though, made it very clear where Japan stands. He straight up said, quote, "Japan stands with Ukraine."
Powerful statement.
Yeah. And it echoes what we've been hearing from the G7, right? They recently doubled down on their commitment to support Ukraine and, to hold Russia accountable.
Yeah.
But it's not just talk.
No, not at all.
Japan's backing their words with action, some pretty serious action. They're talking about, expanded economic cooperation with Ukraine and, of course, more sanctions against Russia.
Right, and these aren't just, symbolic gestures. These sanctions are likely to have some real bite. We could see tighter restrictions on trade with Russia, maybe even asset freezes targeting specific people or organizations.
Okay, so that's the stick. What about the carrot? What kind of economic cooperation are we talking about here?
Well, I think we could see Japan investing more in Ukraine's infrastructure, things like your technology sector, maybe even energy.
So long-term support, helping them rebuild and, become more resilient.
Exactly. It's about more than just getting through the current crisis. It's about setting Ukraine up for a better future.
And, okay, this part was really interesting to me. Apparently, they even talked about Zelensky's peace formula and his 5-point victory plan. Iwaya seemed to be on board. But honestly, how likely is it that these peace proposals will actually go anywhere?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
On paper, the peace formula, it lays out these 10 steps to end the war, right?
Yeah.
It covers a whole bunch of stuff, from nuclear safety to food security and even, of course, getting Russian troops out of Ukraine. And the victory plan, that one's more about the specific military and diplomatic goals. They both sound good, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the problem is putting them into action is going to be incredibly difficult. There's so much mistrust. All sides are dug in on their positions. Getting everyone to agree to actually compromise, that's going to be a huge challenge.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, but there's another aspect to this visit that we can't ignore. It's not all just meetings and talks, right? Iwaya went to Bucha.
Right, he did.
To actually see the devastation there firsthand,
Yeah.
that had to have an impact.
Oh, absolutely. Visiting Bucha, it was more than just a photo op. It was a powerful statement. It shows that Japan understands the human cost of this war. They get it. They see the suffering.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, witnessing that level of destruction firsthand, it must have had a profound effect on Iwaya.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
It probably reinforced their
I guess-
commitment, Japan's commitment to help Ukraine rebuild.
And that commitment, we can actually see it in the numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Japan's provided nearly $12 billion in support. And that includes $6.3 billion in external budget financing, which means basically they're directly supporting Ukraine's government budget.
Wow.
That's a lot of money.
It is.
And we have to remember, Japan's economy, while it's big, it's not bottomless.
Right.
This level of support, it represents a pretty significant chunk of their GDP.
Yeah.
And it's actually more than a lot of other countries are giving.
It's a bold move. Japan's showing that this conflict, it's not just some regional problem, it's a global issue, and that they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. That kind of financial support, it's crucial for Ukraine. It's what's allowing them to keep essential services running, to keep their economy afloat, to keep defending themselves.
And then there's this other interesting detail. Zelensky invited Prime Minister Ishiba to visit Ukraine. What do you think? What could that mean if it actually happens?
No, if that visit happens, it could be huge.
Yeah.
It could really pave the way for even closer ties between Japan and Ukraine. We could see more cooperation, maybe in defense, maybe humanitarian aid.
Okay, and I guess bigger picture, what could it mean for Japan's foreign policy overall?
This could be a sign of a real shift, a strategic shift. Japan's stepping onto the world stage, getting more involved in international security issues.
Interesting. So just to kind of bring it all together, Japan's clearly stepping up their support for Ukraine, and they're doing it on multiple fronts, right?
Yeah.
Politically, economically, even symbolically.
It's a multi-pronged approach.
This visit, I think it was a big moment. It was a real statement of solidarity, and I think it could have ripple effects across the geopolitical landscape.
Absolutely. And it raises some important questions, too. Questions that, we should all be thinking about. What role can a country like Japan, a country that's geographically pretty far removed from this conflict, what role can they and should they play in resolving these kinds of conflicts? And how will their actions affect other countries? Could this even reshape global alliances? There's a lot to unpack here, and it'll be interesting to see how things unfold.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to think about going forward.
Absolutely.
A lot to keep an eye on. All right, well, that's it for our deep dive today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.